to sign in and log on, and then we will get started with our webinar this evening. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for being on time. Just waiting for a few more people to log in. We're just going to give it another 30 seconds, and then we'll be on our way. Thank you guys for your patience. Okay. Josh, if you're ready, I'll start. I'll get us started with an intro. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for participating in our webinar. I'm Claudia Loomis, CB Pet Market's pack leader and your moderator this evening. Is the reason for your pet's itching or gastric distress a true food allergy or an adverse food reaction? Or perhaps the reaction is environmental? How can we tell? Josh Wasserman, Farmina Pet Foods marketing manager, is joining us once again. This time he's sharing his expertise about how to tell the difference between food allergies and how we can address food allergies. A little bit about Josh. Josh has worked at Farmina for over 5 years, and in his role, he has had the unique opportunity to work closely with the Farmina veterinary and scientific team, and has extensive education in animal nutrition and pet health. As many of you know, Farmina is a European pet food company, and their food is available globally. This has offered Josh the opportunity to work with animal nutrition and pet health professionals worldwide, and together they have developed nutritional training for Farmina employees, for their premier retail partners, and this evening for their customers. Before I turn it over to Josh, there's a little bit of housekeeping I would like to discuss. This is going to be an interactive webinar. We will be asking you all to answer a few poll questions as we go along. The poll questions will appear on the right side of your screen. Just click to answer. The formal presentation will take about 40 minutes, and there will be time at the end for us to answer your specific questions. But you do not have to wait until the end of the presentation to enter your questions. You can type them into the chat bar at any time during the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and everyone will receive an email with a link to the recording within the next 24 to 48 hours. And if we do not get to answer your specific questions this evening, I welcome you to email us directly, and we will get your questions answered. And I'll put my email address up, and as well as Josh's as we go along. And with that, I'm going to show you our first poll question. It's a little contest between our store managers. Which of our CB Pet Market stores do you consider your home store? Okay, I'll give you guys a few moments to answer, and then Josh will get us started. Okay. All right. It looks like everybody who's logged on to the webinar so far is from our Washington store. Okay. Josh, do you want to get started?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I want to first thank you, Claudia, and the CB Pet Market team for this opportunity to talk about this very important topic that, we here at Farmina and our pet health coach team out in the field hear a lot from pet parents. And we know that this is something that's very important, and there's still a lot of confusion behind it. So we're really happy to be here to address this and hopefully help you make the best decision for the well-being of your pet. Before we get started, we do have another poll question for you. And this one is, does your cat or dog have a true allergy? So we'll give you just a few moments to respond, and then we'll get started.
Okay. All right. Well, we are seeing some responses. The responses are changing. I just have to give it another few seconds.
Yes.
Because there are some people that are just logging in now into the webinar, so we'll give them a chance to answer as well. Okay. It seems that 27% of the people participating this evening believe their pet to have a true food allergy, 9% no, and 63% maybe, which is great because, maybe you'll get some answers and it'll help you determine whether it is a true food allergy this evening. Josh, please take it away.
Perfect. So before we fully dive into everything, I want to kind of define these two terms because I know this is something that there's a lot of confusion around in itself. So a food allergy is when your immune system has a reaction related to the ingested food. A great example I always like to give for this is even on the human side with peanuts. I think that's an allergy everyone's well aware of. Typically, the signs of that true food reaction or the immune system attacking will be anaphylactic shock or breaking out into swelling or hives or things like that, versus your food intolerance or reaction. So this is a abnormal reaction to the food, but it's not related directly to the actions of the immune system. So they could be a metabolic reaction, pharmacological, a toxic, or idiosyncratic reaction. Adverse food reactions are actually a relatively frequent condition. In fact, it's estimated that it affects about 25% of dogs, and the most common sign is going to be that atopic itching. So if you do notice your pet is itching or scratching themselves a lot more than normal, it can be an early warning sign of a potential adverse food reaction. And this actually brings us to our next poll question. Claudia, are you going to pull that up? Perfect. So the next poll question is, what's the main protein source you feed your pet?
Sorry about that, Josh. I was muted.
No problem. No problem.
We have a good mix of proteins here, so give it another couple seconds. Okay. The responses are about 9% beef, 54% chicken, 9% lamb, 9% fish, and 18% other.
Perfect. And, having chicken as, let's say, the number one selected option is not uncommon. It's probably the most popular protein source for both cats and dogs. And the reason that we always, or I like to ask that question is because when it comes to either a food allergy, a true allergy, or an adverse food reaction, it's going to be related to the protein source. And if we take a look at this chart, oops, sorry about that. We see on dog food, the most common food allergens are actually beef, followed by milk products, and then chicken. So a lot of times when we're talking with pet parents, one of the first things we ask is, well, what is the main protein source you're feeding today? While Farmina, we don't have a beef product ourselves. Typically, when we are talking with pet parents that are suffering from this, whether feeding a Farmina product or coming from maybe a different great brand that you might purchase at CB Pet Market, a lot of the times chicken will kind of lead that conversation. If we look at cats, we see that beef is still in that number one spot. One of the difference is fish moving up into the second spot, milk, and then followed by chicken. and then so on and so forth. So when we talk about the different topics today, this is something really important to kind of keep in mind because, again, chicken is the most commonly used protein in pet food. And one thing to also note that we'll discuss a little bit further is while you might have a product that has a main protein source that's different, sometimes that product might have multiple protein sources. So that's another thing you need to take a look at and think about when selecting the best product for your pet. So 40% of dogs experience an adverse food reaction to just a single ingredient. Another 40% have an adverse food reaction to 2 ingredients, while a final 20% have adverse food reaction to 3 or more ingredients. What's good about this, or what's nice about this, it means that 80% of dogs are only going to have a reaction to 1 or 2 ingredients, which makes finding a product that can work for your pet a little bit easier compared to that unfortunate 20% that have adverse reactions to 3 or more ingredients. And we'll talk about some options that might be available for those pets that are having adverse food reactions to multiple different proteins. In addition, breed does play a role into your predisposition of allergies. So we see that in dogs, among the total canine population, 40% of cases are actually coming from 3 to 4 breeds. So we have 13% coming from German Shepherds, 11% coming from West Highland White Terrier, 19% coming from your Labrador and Golden Retriever. I know if you're a pet parent like myself that has a mixed breed, a lot of times you might find 1 or more of these breeds mixed into your pet, which can actually, play a role into your pet, even as a mixed breed, having some type of predisposition towards allergies or adverse food reactions. On cats, we see that breed does play a role as well, but not to such a great extent when we look at the overall feline population. So about 5% are Persian, 4% Siamese, and 2% Burmese. So typically, if you have, an American Shorthair or, your more mixed breed cat, you typically are more, or you're safer from having or experiencing any type of adverse food reactions in your cat. Just like breed, age also plays a role in whether or not your pet may or may not develop an allergy. So while, dogs, if we're looking at dogs, an allergy can form at any point of their life between, months old to 13 years, or greater for those smaller breeds with longer life expectancies. We do see that the average onset of an allergy or adverse food reaction is going to be around 2.9 years. So typically, if your pet is 3-4+ years, most likely they won't experience an adverse food reaction. The tricky part when we look at this, even with cats that are similar but have an average of 3.9 years for the onset of that to happen, it doesn't mean that if your cat has never, or dog has never been exposed to that protein that they might have a reaction to until they're 10 years old, they might not react. They might still have that reaction, but it's really just because they have never come into contact with that protein source before, that we just weren't sure that they do have an adverse food reaction or allergy to it. When we talk about this, another thing that makes it a lot trickier to diagnose and understand, especially this time of the year, is environmental allergens. So similar to, let's say, adverse food reactions, we see that there is a mean onset of this happening typically between 1 to 3 years of age. The main difference between an environmental allergen compared to an adverse food reaction or a true food allergy is that it's seasonal. So if you notice that your pet is itching, scratching more, maybe has, runny eyes, sneezing, things like that, and it's typically happening during a season or two. Like right now, we're in spring going into summer. We're going to see higher pollen counts, blooming of plants. And if your dog or cat goes outside and is anything like my dog, the first thing they do is try to go into every bush to check for all of the goodies that might be hiding in there. And, that will result in some type of reaction. But if you notice that it does seem to go away without any treatment on its own, you're pretty safe to say that it's an environmental allergen, as adverse food reactions and true food allergies won't go away on their own. So we see that the main causes are going to be those trees or other plants, as well as the weeds and grass. So, another thing I do with my dog who does suffer from some seasonal allergies is when there's a higher pollen count and we're out for longer walks, maybe on a hike, playing in the backyard. One thing you could easily do to help minimize that is when you come inside, maybe get a wet washcloth or paper towel and wipe down their paws as well as kind of their face to try to remove some of that from those key areas that they might be interacting with a little bit more to help minimize any type of environmental allergy that they're suffering from. So one thing, that's very common with all dogs when it comes to adverse food reactions is going to be itching. So this is similar to what we mentioned in the second slide of this presentation. So 90% of dogs will show some itching or scratching. It's typically going to happen. So over 80% are going to have paws as the main spot. So you'll see a lot of biting of their paws, followed by their head or neck area, then going to their inner lower groin, inner thigh area, and then followed by kind of their chest and back. When we look at atopic dermatitis, so we see it's similar, but typically we won't have any type of back scratching. One thing to keep in mind as well during the season are fleas. So fleas might be a little bit more common now than during the winter. So if you do notice that your pet is mainly scratching their upper back or rubbing it, maybe they're going on their back, rubbing it against the sofa or the carpet to try to get some relief, one of the first things you might want to do is check your pet for fleas, especially if they're typically not biting their paws. Versus, a adverse food reaction, you'll definitely notice biting of the paws. So the downside with excessive scratching is going to potential result in some skin infections. So we see that there's recurrent pyoderma, which is a staph skin infection that could occur, Malassezia dermatitis, which is an inflammatory condition, as well as ear infections. And I think something we're all probably familiar with are those hot spots. So those pink spots coming up on their body due to that excessive scratching. I do apologize in advance for some more graphic images coming up, but I think it's important to see some of the examples so you could examine your pet and see, hey, is this something similar that I'm experiencing? So you'll see a lot of redness, some raw skin, potentially, especially on the paws, as well as other areas that could easily be scratched or potentially bitten to get some level of relief. These, unfortunately, can result into some further infections. So, our dogs, let's say, don't have the cleanest or the highest level of hygiene, no fault of their own, but that scratching can cause openings, which can result in infections and further issues. So you definitely want to kind of nip it in the bud. So if you do notice your pet scratching more excessively than normal, definitely start to take note and start to go through some of these different steps we'll take a look at in a moment to try to help prevent this level of issue occurring in your pet. It's always easy to prevent than have to fix something like this. In addition, and this goes back to what Claudia was mentioning, those gastrointestinal issues. So we do see that there are also non-dermatological signs that typically take place with adverse food reactions. So we'll see that 70 to 88% of pets will also exhibit diarrhea. We'll see vomiting coming in a close second with 5 to 21%. Some will, and this goes, I think, a little hand in hand with that diarrhea, is the more frequent defecation at around 6%. Conjunctivitis and rhinitis are going to be a little bit more rare. But another thing to note is, when we're looking at what we're feeding our pets, if you're not noticing straight, let's say, scratching or itching taking place, but you're noticing more gastrointestinal issues, while it definitely can be an adverse food reaction, typically if we're noticing just diarrhea or vomiting, it might not necessarily be an exact sign of an adverse food reaction. Definitely something we want to keep an eye on and try to troubleshoot through many different ways, through actually a similar process that we'll talk about regarding adverse food reactions. But it's not typically, standalone is not going to be the one and only issue. It'll usually be accompanied by that itching, as we saw over 90% of pets do also have itching as a sign. If we move over to cats, very similar. So we're going to see that approximately 100% of the cases will result in itching. So it'll be a little bit of, generalized location-wise. So we'll see head and face is around 53%. Ears are going to be, again, 18 to 54%. The abdomen, wow, sorry about that, will be 25 to 66%. And the extremities are going to be 6 to 33%. So this is a little bit different than dogs. So as we discussed previously, over 90% of the time for adverse food reactions, we'll see dogs having biting, typically on their extremities, their paws in particular, while that's one of the lowest forms for cats, and head being that high place. So if you notice your cat scratching their head, face, neck areas a little bit more, maybe rubbing up against rougher materials such as your couch or a carpet, it can be a sign of an adverse food reaction that your pet is suffering from. So we see that, similar to dogs, there are going to be some skin signs for your cat. So we'll see 40 to almost 100% will have self-induced alopecia. We'll see 30 to 65% of cases have head and neck excoriation. We'll see 21 to 40% experiencing miliary dermatitis, which is a crusty rash around the head, neck, and back. Often, accompanies further intense itching. And then we'll also see 6 to 23% experiencing eosinophilic dermatitis, which is skin lesions. So again, going into some more graphic photos, so just a little early warning sign. So these are self-induced alopecia. So this is, cats, unlike dogs, will also be a little bit more private when they're doing certain things. So if you notice also your cat may be going into a different room a little bit more often than normal, that could also be a sign of some type of issue, such as an adverse food reaction, where they're trying to hide this issue of scratching and itching from you. If you do notice that your cat is starting to have some balding, it can also be a really good early warning sign of some type of adverse food reaction. Again, just like on the dog side, if you do notice this, it's something you want to kind of start to troubleshoot right away. It's much easier to solve earlier rather than later. So again, cats also having sharper nails typically than dogs will also, cut into their skin a little bit more, which can result in this very raw skin that can then result in different types of infections. Again, I do apologize for anyone for some of these graphic images, but again, I think it's super important to kind of see these examples because they don't always start out this large. It might start as like a very small little area on your cat, and through constant scratching and irritation, it'll continue to grow and grow. Cats also, like dogs, will exhibit some non-dermatological signs. So we'll see those gastrointestinal issues such as diarrhea in 28 to 55% of patients. We'll see 29 to 52% experiencing vomiting. Unlike dogs, we're seeing a much higher amount of cats, 3 to 22% experiencing conjunctivitis and 4% rhinitis, while 1 to 20% of cats are suffering from coeluria. Before we jump into the next slide, we do have another poll question for you. So, have you ever done an elimination diet before? And we'll give you just a few moments to answer that poll question.
Okay, I think we'll end the poll question. 60% of our participants this evening have tried an elimination diet and 40% have not.
Great. Well, for those that have done the elimination diet, that's great. You'll know exactly what I'm going to be talking about next. For those that haven't, that's not a problem. And I'm glad you're here today so that way we could talk about it so you could understand how to diagnose your pet and understand, are they having an adverse food reaction? And if so, what are the sources of that? So the way that we are able to diagnose an adverse food reaction is made by doing an elimination diet. So the way that we do an elimination diet, we are going to go from protein source to protein source to understand and test and see which protein sources our pets are having a reaction to. The way that you want to do this is with, and here are some examples of Farmina products, our N&D quinoa skin and coat, diets that are available at CB Pet Market. And what makes these diets great for elimination diets, as well as other diets that CB Pet Market sells, are that they're single animal protein. So that way now we are utilizing a diet that has just one protein source. We're going to do a test on that diet, and then we'll see if our pet is having that reaction or no longer having that reaction. Another term you might see certain diets listed at in CB Pet Market are LIDs, or your limited ingredient diet. So this is another great diets that you could use to check and test what proteins your pet is having adverse food reactions to and which proteins are safe for them. So the single animal protein diets that Farmina offers, and you'll find a lot of other competitor LID diets, are going to also be more non-common protein sources. So for instance, Farmina, our diets, we have a herring, a quail, a venison, and a duck. As you'll notice, we aren't using those protein sources that we know are ranking top, such as such as beef and chicken, because we know that many pets suffer from that. The one exception is on the cat side, having a herring option, as herring or fish is a top allergen source. The difference is Farmina, we're using a herring. A lot of times that main protein allergy with fish is going to be towards your tuna or salmon, something that's a little bit more common, or a larger fish compared to herring. The way that we're going to do a elimination diet is over a longer period of time. An important thing also when doing an elimination diet is making sure you eliminate any other food items, such as your treats or snacks, bully sticks, for instance, that maybe you're feeding your pet, to ensure that one of those are not causing the reaction. That's a thing that we also hear a lot and talk with a lot of pet parents about, because I think so many times we overlook it because that's not the main source of food that we're feeding our pet. But a lot of times, those treats that we're offering our pet are going to be chicken or beef based, which could be the cause of the reaction compared to the food that you might be feeding that is lamb or duck or all those other great proteins out there. So when we're doing the elimination diet, we really want to stick with just that main or that one single protein source. We're going to do this elimination diet over a period of what we recommend is 8 weeks. So after 8 weeks, if you don't see a reaction, there's a 95% certainty that your pet does not have a reaction to that protein source. If you don't see a reaction in about 3 weeks, it's about 50%, and 5 weeks at 85%. So I know for a lot of pet parents, when you're trying to find multiple protein sources, because maybe you like to rotate, maybe you want to have a different protein for a treat or a snack compared to the main protein source, it can take a little time to really find some of those protein sources that will work for your pet. But again, taking that little bit of time, that 8, 16, 24, 32 weeks to find 3-4 different proteins that might work for your pet is really important, because by doing that today, we're able to have different protein sources that we know work for our pet and able to feed and rotate throughout the life of that pet. So to do a food allergy diagnosis, unlike an adverse food reaction, this is a test that you will typically make with your veterinarian. So again, this, unlike an adverse food reaction, which results in more gastrointestinal or skin issues through itching, scratching, the food allergy is the immune system having a negative response to that food. So this is something, it can result in more severe issues. So it is something you definitely want to do with the supervision of your veterinarian. Your veterinarian may require you to go on a prescription product such as our Farmina Vet Life HP Derma, which is a fully hydrolyzed diet. And if your pet does suffer true food allergies, this type of diet allows your pet to live a seemingly normal life. A hydrolyzed diet, for those that might not be aware, is when you take the building blocks of protein, which are chains of amino acids, and when those chains are seen by your immune system attacks them. So when you're hydrolyzing the diet, you're breaking those chains of amino acids into super tiny little chains. And because of that, you're kind of, let's say, a simplified way of thinking about it is you're almost pre-digesting it for that pet. So now that we've cut those chains down, when your pet consumes that food, whether they have a severe allergy to chicken or fish and you're feeding a hydrolyzed fish or chicken food, the immune system actually doesn't recognize that chain of amino acids anymore because it's so tiny that it actually goes undetected, and you are going to prevent that immune system response that you otherwise would have had. So when we look at Farmina's range of solutions against adverse food reactions, we have a wide range of proteins available because, again, we know that your pet might need to try multiple diets because, as we saw earlier, 40% of dogs have adverse food reactions to 2 proteins, and 20% have 2, 3, or more. So we want to make sure that there's different proteins available out there. So in our maintenance diet line that's available at CB Pet Market, you'll see our N&D quinoa skin and coat range available both in dry and wet. We have a herring-based diet, a quail-based diet, a venison, a duck, as well as our cod, fish, and orange pumpkin diet, as well as a cod spelt oat diet for those that are looking for that grain inclusive option. So those are all single animal protein diets that you are able to use to help diagnose through an elimination diet or just feed as a maintenance diet for your pet that might be suffering from adverse food reactions. On the cat side, we have 2 options in our N&D quinoa series, our herring and quail, available both in dry and wet. In wet, we do also have a duck and venison option because we know a lot of cat pet parents are feeding mainly fully wet or supplementing, at the very least, their cat's diet with wet. Similar to the dog side, we do have a grain inclusive diet, our cod spelt oat and orange formula available for cats as well. That's single animal protein source. So we do have some options available, not only great for testing that elimination diet, but also great options to make different proteins available for your cat. Again, if you do suffer from a true food allergy, we do have our prescription Vet Life HP Derma formula also available for felines. In addition to all of that, Farmina, what really sets us apart is our Genius Pet Care program. So Farmina, we have a Farmina Genius app. This is a way that you as a pet parent are able to connect with a Farmina pet health coach who is available to assist through complimentary consultations, as well as connect actually with your local CB Pet Market to ask any questions anytime, wherever you are. In addition, our team, as well as CB Pet Market, are able to create custom feeding plans based on your pet's specific nutritional needs. In addition, through the app, you'll get some great vaccination reminders to make sure that your pet's always up to date with everything, as well as some the ability to quickly report an issue. So if you are doing an elimination diet, going through different proteins, and you do notice your pet is having an issue, you could quickly report that, get some support from Farmina as well as CB Pet Market, and try to move on to a different diet that might be a better fit for your pet. So I do want to thank everyone for taking the time to speak with or to listen to me today. I'm excited to answer some of your questions next. Before we jump into those questions, we have one final poll question for you, and it's, does your pet suffer from? And this way, let's see where some of those maybes were earlier before we started this presentation. Let's see where maybe they end up now.
We're still seeing a good deal of change in the answers, so we're going to give it a few more seconds because this question is an important one. Did you gather enough information from the presentation tonight to rule out one or the other? And we're entering the season right now where environmental allergies are going to become more prevalent. Those red paws, those and itchy skin. So, okay. So 7% of our participants this evening feel it's a true food allergy. 38% just an adverse food reaction, and 15% environmental, but we still have 38% of our participants this evening who are unsure.
Perfect. So sorry to jump in, but before maybe we jump into those questions, I'd like to kind of address the breakdown of this a little bit. So for those that do feel their pet has a true allergy, if you have not already done an allergy test with your veterinarian, I do highly recommend it because some reactions can be life-threatening. So it's really important to kind of go through that with your veterinarian and understand what proteins or food options are safe for your pet. Those that feel their pet are suffering from adverse food reactions, if you have not already done an elimination diet, it's something I highly recommend. It's a great way to really rule out and understand what proteins are safe for your pet and what proteins do not work. For those with environmental allergies, again, as I mentioned earlier, some tips are trying to wipe down your pet's paws and face and other areas of their body after going outside, especially for extended periods of time to help minimize those effects. And last but not least, those that are unsure, after this, you'll have our contact information. More than happy to help kind of go through on a more personalized basis to help you understand maybe where your pet falls in here, if they do fall in here. One thing I also recommend for those that are unsure is maybe start that elimination diet. If you notice that, hey, going through one or two proteins hasn't really made a change through the elimination diet process, it can be an environmental allergy. And then if you notice, hey, at the end of that, everything, let's say it seems to just have gone away on its own, then you could kind of understand that it was an environmental allergy. But again, happy to connect with anyone after this call and kind of help you understand a little bit more personalized based on your exact pet of the best way to proceed.
Okay. We have questions coming in. Thank you very much, Josh. I learned a clearer way to guide customers in telling the difference between a true food allergy or an adverse food reaction. We deal with allergies every day in the stores. It's probably the number one issue that we address with customers, that and overweight dogs. So,
Yes.
And we've had two great webinars that you have provided your time and your expertise to address both of those. Well, let's start with the first question. Kim says, I noticed dairy on the bar graph of common allergens. Is this cow milk? Or if my pet is allergic to beef, would they also be allergic to like a goat milk?
Great question. So let's start with that second one. So if your pet is allergic to beef, it does not mean that they will be allergic to milk products coming from a cow as well as from a goat. So as I talked a little bit about the hydrolyzed diet, so every type of protein has its own configuration of in that chain of amino acids. So the proteins found inside milk from a cow will be different than from their muscle meat. So definitely, it doesn't mean that your pet might not suffer an allergy from both or from goat's milk and beef. It would just be more coincidental than something that is a definitive. Regarding the list, let me just jump back because there was two versions. So we had the dog list and the cat list, and I'm not sure which pet you have. I apologize if I missed that part. Sorry, we're just going a little bit early in the presentation. So here, when we see milk, this is going to typically be from a cow. And then here as well, we see milk products. This is a little bit more generalized, but typically, again, it's going to be beef milk. So it's going to be kind of the cheese and everything associated to that versus just the straight milk.
Okay. Next question. Tony asks, if my cat is allergic to beef, will they also be allergic to bison? Should I try proteins that are more fish-based?
That's a great question. So similar to what I mentioned before regarding going from, even beef to milk or, cow milk or goat milk, it will be different. However, what I usually recommend to pet parents is let's change category. So like you mentioned, when maybe I'm recommending starting out with an elimination diet, if they're feeding a red meat, I will typically have them jump to maybe a poultry or fish, just as you said. Again, let's just try to switch it up greater. It doesn't mean that because they have an allergy to beef, they'll have an allergy to bison, just because, again, those chains of amino acids will be different. Though it's always good to just kind of change that category a little because you'll have greater variation in that protein structures.
Okay. Next question from Andrea. If my dog is allergic to chicken, will they also be allergic to eggs? Their eggs are in a lot of pet foods. And we've had this come up in our stores as well, that customers are looking for egg-free products, pet foods.
Yeah, so No, that's a great question. And again, similar. So here we see, I wanted to pull this slide up again because we'll see that 14.33% is chicken, while eggs are only 3.5%. So if your pet or dog in this case does have a chicken allergy, it does not necessarily mean they will have an egg allergy. A lot of brands such as Farmina include egg in their recipe because egg is, when we look at, let's say, the biological value, so the nutrients coming from the protein sources, egg is what we call the gold standard. And it makes sense because from a enclosed environment, a life form is nourished and kind of created. So that's why so many companies do incorporate egg into their diet. But again, it would be a little bit more coincidental than a guarantee that, if you are having a chicken issue, that you will have a egg issue as well.
Okay. And our next question is from Paula. Paula had her dog allergy tested with NextMune allergy testing. She showed positive to most grains and both cow milk and goat milk. We did the testing due to an ear infection that won't go away. So, and Lisa asks a question about ears because that's another common place where we experience issues with our pets is in the ears. Do you want to address ear issues a little bit and how they relate to allergies?
Yeah. So, as we saw kind of in one of those later slides, that having some type of ear infections is common with it. This is similar also in the human side. And I always kind of relate it back because I think we have a little bit easier time sometimes identifying with it. A lot of times when your body is suffering from some type of issue, whether it's an allergy or an adverse food reaction, your body is now immune system kind of has to go and fight something or is trying to repair something when it comes to the itching and scratching of the skin, when you're tearing into that. So a lot of times that kind of weakens other parts of the body. And one of the early signs or most common things are going to be ear infections. And that's because it's a cavity that's kind of open, and depending on your dog, typically, if you have a dog that has floppier ears, you're going to create kind of that perfect environment, where moisture and bacteria and things are growing. And with a slightly weaker, immune system or a body that's kind of working on something else, you're going to just kind of create that environment where that bacteria could kind of grow and manifest a little bit more and multiply. And that's why typically we will see ear infections as a common thing. On the human side, again, I see this, a lot with my son, where he'll have maybe a infection of some sort or a fever, and so many times he ends up getting a ear infection as well, just because again it's very common and a kind of breeding ground for that. I do think there's another part of the question that I might have missed. If you could repeat that, Claudia. Hope I didn't lose you there. Let's see.
Sorry, I keep putting myself on mute so that we can focus on your answers, and I forget I put myself on mute.
No problem. Just wanted to make sure I didn't freeze or something.
She showed positive to most grains and both cow and goat milk, and they did the testing because of the ear infection. Now that's interesting because grains, if food allergens are you're allergic to the proteins, what are the pets reacting to in grains?
So in grains, just like animal proteins, in grains you're going to have gluten, which is actually that protein part of the grain or plant, and that's why we'll see so many gluten-free options. It's because your body's having that reaction. That's where, celiac disease and stuff kind of comes from, and those digestive issues. It's all related to that protein. So, looking at this list, we do see that wheat actually is the number 4 ingredient when it comes to allergens, as well, followed closely by soy, another plant, and then corn, shortly after. And with that, the good thing is there are plenty of great grain-free options available in the market. So I do want to say, on one hand, you've kind of, let's say, lucked out a little bit regarding what allergens your dog does suffer from, though it's never great that, any pet is having any type of food allergy. But hopefully it makes finding a diet that does work for your pet a little bit easier. As I mentioned earlier, Farmina in particular, we have our N&D quinoa skin and coat diets, as well as that N&D ocean cod, pumpkin, and orange diet. Those are all grain-free options where you won't find any wheat, soy, or other corn, as well as any other type of, grain in it. So those are some great options that could work, as well as I'm sure many other grain-free options that are available through CB Pet Market.
Yes, and Paula added that corn was the number 1 allergen. So, and that makes sense. And
Yep.
there are no, we don't have options at CB Pet Market with corn. Most all of the foods that we carry are no corn, no wheat, no soy, no animal byproducts, artificial colors or preservatives, which is that's like our food mantra at CB Pet Market. So, and there are a lot of options without corn. So, Lisa, her question's a little long. I'm going to give you all the background. She has a Shih Tzu that has had itchy ears since she was 5 months old, with rhinitis at times. Put her on an LID salmon and sweet potato diet. She seemed to be doing a little bit better. She has had conjunctivitis 2 times and has very watery eyes. Has Opticare, also an eye rinse. So she's treating the eye issue, the watery eyes. She is now almost 2. Doctor said Benadryl and Zyrtec 5 milligrams. She also has Trizalutra for her ears. My question: I am having a very hard time finding the food she was on. I am now feeding turkey with rice, Simply Nourish. I also make turkey and add lentils. She has a sweet potato once a day and pumpkin also, which she alternates. She has had constipation since she was 8 weeks old, so I don't know if turkey is good. Also, cooked turkey, and she also bites her paws as well. So, and Lisa also mentioned itchy ears. So it seems like her little Shih Tzu's having a number of different allergic issues. So how would you address that within maybe the Farmina family?
Yeah, and first, I'm really sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, it sounds like, when we looked at that chart, your dog is in that 0.2% of some of these symptoms when it comes to adverse food reactions. And one of the important things for anyone who's going through elimination diets, even though you're maybe feeding an LID diet, if you are still noticing after that 8-week period that it just hasn't really cleared up, it could still be something in that diet that is causing the reaction. So that's why you really want to maybe move on to a different protein source to try to address that further. So, when you look at Farmina's products, and I'll actually, give you my example with my dog, because she was suffering from some adverse food reactions. What I first did, she was eating originally our ancestral grain lamb and blueberry formula. So that has, spelt and oats, both contain gluten, some protein source from there. She was eating lamb. We see lamb is number, what's that, 6 on this list. So what I decided was, okay, let me jump over to our cod, spelt, oat, and orange, that single animal protein source diet, though it does still contain spelt and oats. I did notice things were getting a little bit better, but not, it was 8 weeks or so. It still wasn't perfect. So then I moved to our N&D quinoa skin and coat, which is a grain-free diet. So I'm also eliminating that spelt and oat out of it. And I went with duck because, again, I wanted to try a different type of protein. Again, going through that, noticed, hey, it's gotten better. I've noticed a decrease in scratching, itching, biting of paws. And I was giving that some time. And while it definitely improved, it still wasn't, 100%. So I actually switched her over to our N&D quinoa skin and coat quail. So still in the same family as the duck, in the poultry family, let's say. So I went with the quail, and after 3 or 4 weeks, not even the 8 weeks, I've noticed a significant decrease. I don't see her biting her paws anymore. I don't see her scratching herself nearly as much as she was. So this is a diet she's actually been on now for about 7 weeks. So I'm going to keep this up for at least another, week or two. And then what I'm going to do is try our N&D quinoa venison, because I want to see what other protein options are available for her that can work. In addition, which is something else that I'm guilty of. So it's like the shoemaker who doesn't have a good pair of shoes. So I'm a sucker. So while I was doing some of those testing, so I've definitely tainted the results. I was still giving my dog bully sticks. So I didn't fully eliminate that. She is a puppy, so I did, in a highly active breed. She's a herding dog. So I did need something to kind of occupy her a little bit, especially at night and during the winter where we're not trying to go outside quite as much. So that was something also that, I made a mistake on. So, if you're like me, if you've done an elimination diet, but maybe you haven't cut out all of those treats, it is something you do want to eliminate as well. So I've kind of, unfortunately had to go cold turkey on that, but we're seeing great improvement. So that's what I'm going to be testing next. So I'm going to continue with the quail diet. I'm going to switch over to venison, see if that's working. If that's working, I'm going to try to reintroduce that bully stick into it. If I notice that, hey, things aren't working, then I probably know that the adverse food reaction is coming from that beef. So I'm going to eliminate that, go back to that duck or the cod formula, and then see how that works. So to sum up, what options are kind of available? If you're really trying to do the elimination diet, I really recommend going with our skin and coat diets, those single protein, limited ingredient diets. That we have a quail version, we have a duck, we have a venison, as well as a herring available for dog. On cat, we have just the duck, as well as we have the herring as well as the quail available in both dry and wet, and then we have the duck and venison in wet as well.
And with an elimination diet, it does take time.
Yes.
And some patience and some good record keeping too, to see what did I try the last time, what am I going to try this time, what am I going to reintroduce slowly. So, and Lisa, to your question about you're finding it hard to find Simply Nourish. Simply Nourish is a PetSmart exclusive brand. And I don't know if you've looked for it recently, but they did have a recall back in August of last year, late August, because they had, some higher levels of vitamin D than they should have had in the food, because that's very regulated where your vitamins and minerals should be. So that might explain why you're having a difficult time finding it. So, but I noticed that turkey, just because chicken is on the list of food allergens, other fowl like turkey and duck, could be very good options.
Yes.
So going in the direction of turkey is a good choice, because that is not commonly reactive for pets. And turkey is commonly available now in many different food brands that we have. But quail is also a great source of protein, and is a novel protein. And I think that's it for our questions this evening. I'm just giving I'm giving the list of questions just one more list. Okay, Paula asks, do Farmina Foods have pea starch?
So in some of our diets, such as the NAD quinoa skin and coat, we do utilize pea starch. And we use pea starch as a binding agent. So when you are formulating a kibble, you need some type of starch or source of starch to physically form the kibble. Otherwise, you can't get that shape. So we've decided to use pea starch as the binding agent, and we're using a more minimal amount, around 18 to 20% will be that, which is kind of that number you need to form the kibble. But what you'll notice is we're not using a whole pea. So we're not using the proteins or the fat from it. We're using just the starch.
Okay. All right. And actually, that is our last question this evening. With that, I want to say, Catherine says, the information was wonderful. Thank you. T says, thank you so much for a great presentation. Yeah. So, Josh, thank you again. This has been a wonderful presentation. I remind everybody that they'll be receiving a link to this recording in their via email in the next day or so. You can share that link with others as well. If you feel that you have friends or loved ones that would like to learn a little bit more about food allergens. And in about a week's time, this will also be available on our website. If you go to the cbpetmarket.com website, we have all of our webinars available to view at any time. So thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time this evening. Josh, thank you very much. I'll
Thank
turn my
you.
camera on. And we look forward to another webinar in a month or so, and soon, and maybe more additions from the Farmina family. They're a great partner for us at CB Pet Market, and we really enjoy working with them. They're very knowledgeable, excellent food company, and Josh is a great guy, and a very
Thank you so much.
educated, knowledgeable guy. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful holiday weekend, all. And again, if you have questions that you think of later, you feel free to email me. You'll get my email in the link when we send out the webinar recording. So everybody, again, thank you very much. It's been wonderful, and stay safe and well. Bye, guys.
Thank you, and same to you.
Okay. Bye-bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.